Good evening and welcome to the January 12th special council meeting budget meeting. Members of the public were provided with the following methods to watch and participate in this open meeting. Attend in person at the North Dumfries Community Complex. Attend electronically via Zoom to observe the meeting or to speak to an item on the agenda. You can watch the live stream by accessing the meeting on the Township's YouTube page. Submit written comments to the Clerk's Division that were provided to council members and will form part of the public record. I'd now like to call the meeting to order and ask for approval of the agenda, please, Councilwoman.
Moved by myself, second by Council Williams, that council adopt the January 12th, 2026 special budget meeting council agenda as presented.
All those in favor? Carried, thank you. I would now like to do the Indigenous acknowledgement. We acknowledge the land on which we gather today as the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral people. We acknowledge the enduring presence of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today, their achievements and their contributions to our community. We offer this acknowledgement as an act of reconciliation between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in Canada. And I'd like to commend our staff on the relationship we have built with our Indigenous partners and involving them in online planning and everything else. We have created a wonderful relationship. We welcome the new chief of the Mississaugas of New Credit, and I wish them well as thanking the past chief as they leave. So as we work on our relationship with them, let's reflect on all that we have done and what we can do on the end. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest under the general populations? Saying none. 6.1 report FIN 2026 draft budget. Presentation by Christina Brooks, Treasurer Director of Corporate Services, overview of the draft 2026 budget and review of operating budget for each of the departments. The draft budget was released on December 8th, 2025 and is available for viewing on the Township website. Are there any members of the public in attendance who wish to speak to the 26th budget? Seeing none. Christina, would you like to present?
I have a short presentation to go through, and as I go through it, we can talk about each department in the operating budget. And if there's questions, I'm happy to follow along the way. Or if you would like to ask them at the end, that's fine as well. So tonight we will be going over the operational budget. On Wednesday, we will continue if there's anything else on the operational budget that we need to discuss. We will review the 2026 capital budget. And then when we reconvene on February 2nd, we will deal with any issues that have been raised on the next two meetings. And then any follow-up from the operating or capital budget, review the 10-year capital and the 3-year departmental business plans. For tonight, I will provide you some overviews of some of the key drivers behind our 2026 proposed budget. We'll discuss what that means in terms of taxation dollars and implications for tax rates. We'll review some of the revenues and expenses as a global for the township, and then discuss the departmental highlights. Back in August, council directed us to provide a budget at 5.5% tax increase, with 3% going to increases in our transfers to our capital reserves and 2.5 for the year-over-year operating budget. And that is the budget you have in front of you. As a reminder, everybody's property taxes are not based on current market assessments, but they are still on the 2016 values assigned by MPAC. So you can't look at market sales and then multiply by tax rates right now. That's not correlation. So you do have to go back to the old numbers. And the other thing that I think it is very important to remember is that although we collect taxes in total, the township share is actually only 26% of what we collected in 2025. 14% was the school board, and the remaining 60% we collected on behalf of the region. So I've also put the chart in for 2026 on the average assessed household, which is a $455,000 house here in North Dumfries. The township portion of that is only $1,300 and change of the $5,153. So it's just something to keep in mind that we can only control the one portion. To break this down, there's two ways to look at this. Again, on the average assessed household, a 5.5% increase would translate to $75.43 increase over the prior year. For those who want to figure it out for themselves, we also provide for every 100,000, it's $315.30. So that again can help you do the math on your own property. But this is, last year we had a 6.4% increase, so that was a little higher. So this year we are proposing a slightly smaller, but not unconsequential increase in tax rate. There is a difference between the urban and rural township rates because of the air special levy. Some of the key influences on our budget, probably the biggest one that we are struggling with is that our tax assessment only increased by 1% from 2025 to 2026. There has been little new development in the past few years. MPAC has 3 years to fully assess new properties, so they've caught up with all of the lags that were in the previous developments, and now since we are not having a significant amount of development right now, we are not seeing that translated to a significant increase in the tax assessment. That does limit some of the new growth, which can help pay for additional programs. The other thing is that thankfully inflation rates, while not zero, are back into the range that the Bank of Canada would like. And they were 2.2% year over year in November. They fluctuated around that 2% mark for most of 2025. And we do anticipate that that is where they will stay again going into the next year. All things being equal in the economy. The other big factor besides wages for the township is utilities. So hydro, gas, propane, water, sewer costs. Those are continuing to have substantial increases year over year. And that is the other major cost center for the township. This is a chart you would have seen in the past. I brought this up in our August meeting. This is based on the 2025 tax rates, because although people have passed budgets, nobody has set the 2026 tax rates. But you can see where we sat among our comparable groups. And then, as I said, we were proposing a 5.5% increase, but that is on just our portion. But it is just like to remind people when they're talking percentages, go from $1 to $2, that's 100% increase, but everyone's okay with that. So when you hear percentages in the media and things, you do really have to look at what dollar amounts behind that, what is the impact for individuals. This chart is a breakdown of the sources of our revenues. You can see that the majority of the money we raise comes from our property taxes. It is fairly consistent year over year. What has changed is between the fees and charges and grants. We have secured a few other operating grants this year, so that percentage has increased a little bit, which has caused the fees and charges to go down a little bit as a percentage of total revenues. But again, it's very consistent from year over year. Other revenues would include things like our investment income on our bank accounts and interest on our taxes and things of that nature. Again, if we look at our operating expenses by departments, you can see that the leisure and community services and our engineering and public works comprise the biggest percentage of our spends. Within corporate services is the rent for the town hall, which makes that a little larger than what you can normally see, but as we fund that from a reserve, it doesn't actually impact the taxation dollars. When we're looking at the sources of revenue for the transfer to our capital reserves for 2025. Sorry, it's totally 2026. My apologies. I'm still working on year-end stuff, so the year's blend. Apologies. 2026 budget. You can see that 48% of what we're putting away for future capital expense is coming from our taxation dollars. We are very lucky as a township to have Grandbridge Energy and the aggregate levy as another source of money for our capital projects in the future. That does help offset some of what we would otherwise be required to raise through tax dollars. Since we presented this budget back in December to you, there have been 2 additions to the operating budget. There's been other additions to the capital, which we'll talk about on Wednesday, but the 2 items here are we got the great news that we are able to get Growing Canada's Community Canopies Grant, which will help us plant trees in our parks along our boulevards and help to grow that urban canopy. It does require a matching program, so we had some already in the budget. It does require a little more funding to match the full amount of the grant for the year, but we are recommending that that come out of the green strategy reserve account, and therefore will have no impact on the taxation levy. The other item is that there are several land acquisition and dispositions that are in various stages of being, and we are proposing that any costs related to those be funded from the from the land sales reserve account. Again, that would mean that there is no impact on the budget, on the tax levy portion of the budget. If we start looking at some of the department highlights, and if you do want to flip along in your books if you want to, or we can discuss at the end. This is an election year, so you will see that grouped in with council and is also the election department. So of course, we will actually be spending on election in 2026. But the majority of that is coming from our election reserve. And the other thing that we have changed is based on conference attendance and conferences costs. We have proposed that $5,000 per council members be set aside to attend conferences. We did adjust it a little bit down based on the fact that only 3 councilors are attending Roma. As of today, only 3 are attending AMO, but AMO isn't until August. So although hotels might be harder to come by, there's still time to register for that conference. Within the corporate services department, this is where we include the lease for the municipal offices at 106 Earl Thompson. That is being funded from the Grandbridge Energy Reserve account, so there is no impact on the tax levy. One thing to highlight is we increased the community grants from $37,500 to $40,000 this year. So far, the requests, we're still finalizing the totaling because a few people tell us the rooms they want, but don't provide a budget amount that they want. So we are exceeding $65,000 for grant requests, and it is a mix of waiving of fees and charges for room rentals and some cash as well. So as in other years, the working group will review them and we'll bring a report back to council on how to allocate those dollars. Also within the corporate services department is where you will find the grants that we provide to the 2 cemeteries and to the Sheffield Lions Club for the help offset some of the maintenance costs for the Scots Women's Institute building.
If I can just interject there, and under provincial or federal, I'm not sure which is right, but if the cemetery is not taken care of, it is the sole responsibility of the municipality. So this organization saves us significant money by running the cemeteries. Thank you.
When you turn to the fire department and emergency department, you will see that we've made some, last year, we started a new fee for the burn permit program and for the cost recovery. So based on our experience with the initial programs, we made some adjustment to the revenue line. The other thing to highlight is that after wages and utilities, the cost for repairing vehicles is increasing at very high rates. So again, we've had to increase our costs for our vehicle maintenance. Some of the vehicles are getting older, which means they need more repair work, and some of them it's just costs more, unfortunately, to repair and maintain.
So we flagged this for the fire department, but it's applicable to public works, leisure and community services. The adjustment in part is attributed to wages paid for mechanic fees, as well as the parts themselves. There's been an exponential increase in parts. Some of it's attributed to supply, some of it's attributed to tariffs.
Some highlights from the engineering and public works are, as just discussed, the vehicle repair costs are absolutely increasing to reflect market pricing. The department continues to focus on road and roadway allowances safety. That is one of the major programs that they run. And then, as you are all aware, since we have brought we have stopped using a third-party contractor for winter maintenance for any of it. It is 100% in-house. That has been adjusted in the 2026 budget. If we turn to leisure and community services, again, one of the major costs relates to property maintenance, refrigeration costs and utilities for the NBCC and the ACC. Those are significant dollar spend for the department. We have also slightly increased the partnership with Legs. That program started in the fall of last year, and that is our youth room and other youth programming. So that has increased to reflect the fact that it will be the entire year. And one of the other things I just wanted to highlight is that we seem to be having really good pickup with our neighboring events. So our communities outside are using that funding to provide local festivals, events for the local communities, which is nice to see that that is being used. When we turn to the planning department, I think they would be able to say that every day is different, although it's not quite that bad, but the province continues to change the legislation, update it, amend it, and so staff are continuing to monitor how that is now impacting them from having the full planning authority.
One of our biggest drivers is now incurring the full expense associated with Ontario Land Tribunal hearings. We had 3 of them in 2025.
Every day is fun. And then although the building department is a self-funded department under legislation and does not impact the tax levy, I do just want to highlight that we are still expecting limited development and therefore building permits to be issued in 2026. It doesn't mean that there won't be any, it's just not on the pace that we had originally been forecasting for. That really is the end of my presentation. So if there's any questions regarding the operating budget items, we'd be happy to discuss them. There is also then the discussion paper 1 for your consideration. And then as we have previously discussed, we will move on to the other sections on the next meetings.
Thank you, Ms. Brooks. We have quite a lengthy motion here that touches on several items. So if we could, Ms. Wilms Council Wilms will be reading this motion.
Madam Mayor, are there any questions?
Are there any questions, councillors? We're going to go through the book later, right?
No, I
The book's now? Okay, then Council Wilms. And then Councillor Austin? Tell us what page you're on, please.
So my first question is probably just to better understand the impact valuations of the homes and the residential assessments. So we've noticed that house sales have kind of gone a bit bumpy lately, and that the pricing of houses has weakened. So how does that have any impact on how homes are assessed, and does it also change how? So I'm for the new builds or homes that were reassessed recently, were they still all reassessed at the 2016 value? Like, I'm still very confused a little bit about that, so I was just wondering if I could get some more information on that.
Ms. Fox.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councilor Wellms. Yes, everything is still assessed at 2016 valuation, so the market value pricing and fluctuations we've seen in the last couple of years have absolutely no impact on the assessment. I did look at some numbers just to be able to, so new houses that are coming in that we're selling for $800,000 to $900,000 in the market, we were only getting new assessment of $450,000 to $500,000 because that is what they would have sold for back in 2016. So we get the value of those new builds as they would have come online if it was still 2016. So there's no changes to the fact that it went up to 1.5 million and now it's down to 1 million. None of that is impacting how impact does the assessment for the residential properties, as they're all assessed as what they would have been at market value back in 2016. And even then it was probably 15 to 20% under market value in 2016.
So, and just if you look at the townhouses as an example, generally in the marketplace right now, price has softened. Generally speaking, it's in the $680,000 to $720,000 range if you were to make a transaction in the present period. They're being assessed between $265,000 and $385,000. So they made the adjustment back to 2016 valuation, just like they have for the single attached loans. And that's why our average assessed, while it's the highest in the region, was only at 455,000. That it adjusted to a 2016 valuation. Be hard pressed to find homes in North Dumfries running that down.
Councilor Austin and then Councilor Tillman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is this, can we ask questions about items 3, 5, 3, 6 at this point, or is this like the Victoria Park and the Public Works gate thing, or that's in the budget? Is that at this point, or are we moving on to that?
So, Councillor, those items are 2026 capital budget items, which we're going to focus on capital on Wednesday evening.
Okay.
Tonight, we're sort of focusing on the operating budget. And there are two changes to the operating budget from what was presented back in December. And they were on the two slides that Ms. Brox just shared. One happens to deal with the grant we received from the Canadian, through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities via federal government. And the other was money set aside for land acquisition, land disposition.
Sorry, I'm just checking. Okay. But like on my agenda, it says Monday, January 12th, and all those things are listed. They're not listed for Wednesday, they're listed for today. So is that incorrect?
No, the report clearly states that this report is a consolidated report dealing with both Monday and Wednesday evenings.
Councilor Tillman.
So in line with the question about the impact, I guess just to clarify, property could be reassessed, and this is a question. So the property could be reassessed if there was a renovation done to the property, and then the value of the property would then be reassessed at that point, whenever, if it was a year ago or 4 years ago, it would be reassessed at that point to the new property value, and then the property taxes would be at that level or at that, after that assessment, is that correct?
Ms. Ross.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to Councilor Tilly. It is a little bit of a combination. So if you were to add a second story to your house, for an example, as your renovation, MPAC would assess it as you had completed the renovation, which would be effective as of the date you completed the renovation. However, they would take what that would have done to your property value back in 2016. So they would effectively deflate the value back to what it would have done in 2016. So it may cost you $500,000 to renovate and put a second floor on, just making a number up, it probably was way more than that. But you might only have a $30,000 adjustment or a $50,000 or whatever the value of that renovation would have been in 2016 to the house. So that is why our overall assessment creeps up a little bit from year to year, even though we're at 2016, is because people make renovations or changes to their houses. And also as we change the mix, if we build a whole bunch of more freestanding homes or we build a whole bunch of townhouses, that might change the average value, but for us, 455,000 is the average assessment.
Councilor Long.
Madam Mayor, I just have a question, on page 20 of the agenda with regards to the fire department, fire contract. Just want to find out from either from the CAO or from the chief, where are we heading with this, outside contract? It looks like we're at $480,000 the draft budget, but the actual was 329. So I just want to understand that number. And also the dispatch number has gone up to 27,000, even though the actual was 10,000. So I just want to get some clarification on those two numbers.
Ms. Ross.
One thing I will point out is the actuals were only to October, so that was meaning the fourth quarter, which we just paid in December. So it was closer to the actual budget because it's 103,000 and change, I believe, each quarter. So you have to add that into the final number.
CO McNamee.
So Madam Mayor, through to Councilor Bowman. Speaking specifically to the contract for fire services, this is a contract with the city of Cambridge. It occupies all of Ward 4 and approximately a third of Ward 3. And first response is provided 1 or 2 calls in urban Cambridge into the contract area. And for any calls that are either large scale or will occupy more than an hour, North Dumfries is toned out. And we respond in parallel with Cambridge and then take over command and frontline services. So it's for a first response in support of residents, businesses in the contract area. We have just completed year 1 of a 3-year contract. And so we have a fixed rate. We know what the increase is for this year. We know what the increase will be for 2027. The contract is up for renewal at the end of 2027. We're looking at 2028 and beyond. The rates are reflective as a percentage of the overall operating cost to deliver a fire service in urban Cambridge. And our costs per hour and or per capita is actually slightly decreasing with each renewal because Cambridge is growing at a faster rate than we are. It is exclusively for fire suppression and rescue services and the replacement of rolling stock and or equipment in support of fire suppression and rescue. It does not account for things like fire prevention or overall administration, because we're responsible to continue to deliver those services as part of our base budget and as per the fire chief's obligations in accordance with provincial legislation. The contract value, we would not be able to deliver 2 fire halls in that geographic area for the equivalent of this cost. when I look at the cost of paying for wages, the training, the fitting up of equipment, the heating, cleaning of the fire hall, the fuel for the trucks, the insurance on the trucks. Extra dispatch fees, as well as the capital contribution for rolling stock or replacement equipment. We constantly, as we negotiate these contracts. We look at what would it be if we were to run a volunteer hall. In the contract area, providing a comparable level of service that we provide for. 2/3 of Ward 3 as well as Wards 1 and 2. And we strip out those costs and then we apply it against the contract. We continue to be in a favorable position. So we are in year 2 of a 3-year contract. The contract is up for renewal at the end of calendar year 2027. As it relates to dispatch services. These are the dispatch services that we provide funding. We are partnered with all the other area municipal departments in Waterloo. And we receive consolidated dispatch services through the Kitchener Fire Service. And our draft budget being presented to council for calendar year 2026 is for the sum of 27,000 to dispatch the fire department. Is an actual reduction of $3,000 year-over-year. We budgeted 30,000 in 2025, and we've made those adjustments partially because of the changes that council has previously approved related to the tiered medical responses and reducing the cost, the frequency of those dispatch services. So it translates into a slight reduction in overall calls. However, we are generally increasing at a rate of about 1.5% to 2% year-over-year. Partly because of growth in the community, partly because of background traffic that flows through the township in terms of care shed and the increased frequencies related to motor vehicle collisions. At 27,000, that covers all capital in terms of next gen 911 and all the systems that are operated through Kitchener, as well as the replacements of their computer terminals, as well as their overhead attributed to wages and benefits of their dispatcher services.
Councillor Tilly.
Just moving back to the impact question that I had asked, and then just in regards to a specific resident who had said in this past month that when they received they were going through and discussing with me the issue they had with the tax bill for the final tax levy for the upcoming tax levy. So they're going through that, and to go straight to the detail was that the original price of the house that they purchased versus after they did the renovations, and it was an extensive renovation. The property value went from approximately $300,000 to up to $700,000. Is that kind of falling in line with what we're discussing with the 2016 comparison there? Because that's the part that unfortunately my lack of knowledge and experience puts me in a place where I don't know how to answer that, and I do plan on reaching out to more staff already, Rich, as a CEO McNally, a little bit about this prior to Christmas break, but is just because of the fact that this is obviously a situation that they're not happy with, and it was another person that actually had a conversation with me about it. So the long and short is that kind of $400,000 jump up that, to me, I mean, for the value of the property the person now has, but at the same time, just does that fall in line with the 2016, or is that kind of getting closer to the newer cost of what the housing is?
Ms. Ross.
For you, Madam Mayor and Councilor Tilly, there are a lot of factors in this. One of the things we have found is that MPAC was not always good at catching updates in previous years. So sometimes when there's a new renovation, they also realize that there were 3 other buildings on the property that nobody had actually assessed previously. Now they can't go back. They can only go back 3 years and they have to know about it, so they just kind of update it and move forward. So there are a lot of variables as to whether or not that is a appropriate valuation or not. The unfortunate thing is that under provincial legislation, the assessment value is completely within MPAC's jurisdiction. So we as the township cannot actually adjust it. It is my understanding that every single time they do assess the property, they are supposed to send out a notice to the homeowners with the adjustment. Unfortunately, a lot of homeowners ignore it, but there is a process where you can request reconsideration. It is normally a fairly short period, and it's 90 days from the assessment. However, if there has been an error, you can request that they would relook at it as well. But you have to be able to demonstrate what the error is, and it really depends on what's the renovation, what was the property. Did they properly assess it before, or have they finally caught up now, and this is what the property should have been assessed?
So before you carry on, Councillor Tilly, I recommend that they contact them back,
Mhm.
because we can't address this at all. But Impact used to come here once a month, and you could book in a meeting to talk with them, and they didn't have people showing up. So they stopped doing that, but they are quite open to you contacting them and them addressing the issue. So, does your department have all Impact's contact information? Councillor,
They just ask that you call the main line, and then they will direct you to the right person. So unfortunately, I used to have a person I could hear call them, but now they just ask that you call their main line.
yeah, and I just got an update from the new person, and I just described it, so I may search through my emails and try and find that again. But just have them contact them, because this council can't address that, and neither can you or the individual has to do it personally. Councillor Tilly.
So the only thing I wanted to ask, thank you, is in that reassessment, or whenever they make that change, is there a description, or is it just a cost change? Is there something that explains that increase or the change, whatever it may be, or is it just, here's the new price value?
Ms. Fox.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Tilly. Again, it depends. So it is not a significant breakdown in that you added 2 bathrooms, a fireplace, and this, and so you can't actually check their calculation. However, they normally say that it is due to a historical change on the property. They do say it's due to a renovation, or they do normally provide some broad brushstroke guidelines as to why the property has changed. And if you do speak with them about your own property, they will be able to discuss it in more detail.
Thank you.
Councillor,
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question with regards to the building department on page 23 of the budget book. I'm just concerned, what kind of trouble are we in with this department? We're still showing, in our proposed budget here, $300,000 in building permits and inspection fees. But Ms. Brock said that that's going down, it's decreasing, and then our wages, our exposure to wages is $961. So I'm concerned that we're gonna be, once again, upside down in that department. Even though I know we made some changes. How realistic is the number, the $300,000 number that staff have penciled in for building permits and inspection fees?
CEO McNeely.
So Madam Mayor, through to Councillor Rowland. We are still showing money coming from internal borrowing to offset, zero out the budget, given the fact that revenues are suppressed. Our biggest line item in this department specifically is wages and benefits, and we have reduced that overall expenditure. So if you look at regular wages in 2025, we had budgeted approximately 467,000. We are dropping that to 300, well, rounded approximately 317,000. And then there's the corresponding adjustment in benefits, and both employer as well as payroll remittances. we are and we have continued to make overall reductions in expenditures, recognizing the reduction number of building permits and building activities, and we've scaled the department accordingly.
Council Rose and then Council Rose and Council Roman.
So I got a question with regards to on page 29 and 30. Pardon me, I'm looking at the wrong question. It was 31. 32. So on page 31, we show that the general sidewalk costs covered by general levy has gone down significantly. So we brought the services in-house. But I was saying on page 32 that special area levy was still increasing. So I was just wondering if we brought these services in-house, why the special levy was still increasing. Thank you, Madam.
I don't see anybody's hand up.
I'm just trying to find the lines in your speaking.
Pardon me, so at the end of, on page 31, we show that the total sidewalk costs have decreased. So the actual from 2025 from 10/31 was 97, we're budgeting 32,000 totals. But then we do have an increase on page 32, we say there's an increase of 29,000 at rough estimate for the special area levy.
Madam Mayor, if I can start.
Go ahead, Ms. Fox.
One of the things that we did was we separated out the proportionate wages and then materials and supplies to the sidewalk air special levy. However, I did not break the materials and supplies out of the general winter control into the sidewalks. At this time, I had left it all as one percentage, and then our estimate of what we would be using for the sidewalk would be again only that portion of it, and the rest of it would have just been in our line salt, sand, materials and supplies. So that's why it looks like the air special levy is going up a little bit more than the sidewalks, and it's because I didn't break that out. If council would like to see that, I'd be happy to attempt to break it out in more detail, if that is of use to you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to Director Brooks. I think that might be helpful because right now I don't know if it looks very nice for our air resident. They see this and they're probably wondering what's going on. So I think it would be helpful just to kind of understand most of that.
So directed. Council Roman, you next to. So.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So Council Williams basically stole my question. But I was going to say that on page 33, thank you for being concerned about the air resident. On page 33, that special area rating. That was my question essentially is how are we able to be transparent now with the residents of Village of Air regards to the cost of the sidewalks and the snow removal? Previous, it was a independent contract. It's very simple to say, here's the number. Now it's being brought in-house, so I assume we're using same supplies that we're using on the roads and we're using some of the same staffing. So I'm just wondering, does it make sense, A, continue on with this special area rating? That's my first bone of contention. But the second thing is, how transparent are these numbers going to be? As Ms. Brock just pointed out, it's already getting fuzzy. So I just want to make sure that we're very clear with the residents of what they're being charged, how they're being charged, and hopefully we can move towards not having this special area rating eventually.
Ms. Fox.
I will leave the discussion on the air special rating for council, but I will tell you that when I was looking at the wages, we did hire 3 specific contractors for the sidewalk program. And so we are able to track their hours and then their wages will be able to allocate it to there. Since we made this change mid-year, we did not do the best job at making sure we had the appropriateness for 2025 since the budget was set differently, but we have changed. We have discussed changing our timesheets and other things to be able to track it. We are putting GPS trackers in the units, and I would have to defer to Director Raycroft to see if there was a materials and supplies gauge on them that we could then also track that, but it is not our intention to make this untransparent. We would like to be as transparent as possible so that they understand that they are getting value for the service.
Mr. Rakoff, do you plan to remain silent or step up? How would you
Through you, Madam
say
Mayor, we're not currently tracking how much salt would be used on sidewalks and parking lots. We could do that. That would be a little challenging for us because we're not, the sidewalk units we have doesn't have metering like the large units have. I highly doubt we can hook that up, but we can give estimates and based on tonnage what we used in previous years through contract.
Councilor Norman?
Madam Mayor, just as a follow-up, I guess the question I have is, bringing the service in-house, is that an ability for us to reduce the cost to the residents of air? Or is it just a way for us to make sure we maintain this gold standard? And if we're gonna maintain this gold standard, I know we have the best clean sidewalks in the entire region. I know I've been to other towns and villages and cities where my daughter lives in Kitchener, it still hasn't even been plowed yet, let alone the sidewalks. So we have pretty amazing snow removal service here. So if the residents are happy paying us extra money to get this amazing gold service, then I'm fine with that. But that's our mandate, or are we trying to save money by bringing it in-house? So I just want to understand what's the philosophy of the Public Works Department?
Possibly both. I think CEO McNeely wants to go and so does Ms. Brock, so CEO McNeely, you go first.
So Madam Mayor, when we brought this to council and received direction, we gave council 3 options. And council picked the recommended option that was put forward by staff, which was to bring it in-house with the one-time cost attributed to growing the fleet to be used for sidewalks and parking lots. And then to upstaff with hiring 3 additional seasonal contract employees for 6-month terms. 2026 will be the first full calendar year of these services being brought in-house. While we staffed up November and December, obviously we were well through the 2025 budget year when we made that adjustment. So 2026 will be the first full calendar year where we deliver 100% winter services in-house. We indicated to council, fine, you far exceeded minimum maintenance standards. You do that on your roads, and you far exceeded on your sidewalks. There is a cost to have the sidewalks plowed out and treated with product within 8 hours of call out for service. It would be hard pressed to see that consistently done in other jurisdictions across the region. So we have maintained the service level that has been funded in previous council budgets. By bringing it in-house, we have undertaken 2 things. We actually now can better control on a more consistent basis that level of service. Because we control the staffing and the deployment of staffing and resources. We have the ability, because staff is available now Monday through Friday during regular business hours. If we run into a short experience of bad weather or perhaps blowing conditions, we could deal with it during staff hours at no additional cost other than the fuel and or the material that might be deployed for those pockets of work that might be done. Before, we actually had to pay for that service at whatever the hourly rate was. Overall, we'll be demonstrating to you a cost containment. So what we are tracking is all of our hours of service coming from our timesheets, deployed to the parking lots and the sidewalks. What that cost would have been if it had been under the contracted rate versus what our hourly rate is based on those contract positions and an assumption on a rate of application for both fuel as well as material supply. And have confidence you will see that has actually been a cost containment measure than what we would have experienced in November and December if we had continued to have contracted services. We were out 10 days straight for between 12 and 14 hours because of those weather conditions. That would have been an astronomical cost under the contract.
Ms. Brooks, would you like to add anything?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The other thing I will mention is that the air special area rate adds $70.84 to the average homeowner for this service. It is an additional $8 increase over what the rural residents are paying in addition this year for those additional costs. So we do absolutely try and contain costs, and it is a service that is provided here.
Councillor Austin.
Just one quick question to CO McNeely. So just to piggyback on Councillor Rowland's question about the cost now that we're doing it in-house, is it gonna take that full year to assess kind of where we are with costs, providing it ourselves, and then next year's budget, the numbers may reflect a lower, if it's a lower cost, those numbers will be adjusted?
CO McNeely.
So Councillor Ross, I'm gonna answer the question in two facets. We will be coming to you after this winter season. So sometime in likely May. To give you an experience of what January to, let's say, mid-April. What the experience was for undertaking sidewalks and parking lots. And comparing it against the contract with services. If we had continued to pay the hourly rate that was part of this year's contract. Remember, we entered into a 5-year contract, we exited it early. We can't, so we know what the rate was going to be on a per hour of service. So we'll give you that experience from January to mid-April, the report in May. And so you'll be able to see a comparison there. And yes, with every service, every year, we always look back on every service line. What did we receive in terms of an expenditure? How did it track against our budgeted numbers? If the number was up or down from what we had anticipated, what were the motivators behind either the increase and or the decrease from the budget projection? And what adjustments then do we make for the next budget cycle? We do that on every line account. And so by extension, yes, that will also be factored into the winter maintenance levy for sidewalks and parking lots. As part of the 2027 work that we will be doing in the fall of 2026.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Councillor Williams?
I have a question on page 35. With regards to the recreation and cultural services overhead. So in 2025, we approved 1.3 million. 2026 budget is 1.4, but the actuals are like well below what was in the budget for 2025 as of October 31st. And I was just wondering if I could get some information for you, Mayor, staff, about what was going on there. Thank you.
CO McNeely.
So Madam Mayor, through you to Councillor Williams, it's still be applicable to public works, just like it is for leisure and community services. When we do our draft budget numbers in, I'll call it the overhead, general admin, we roll up all wages for all staff in that department, along with their benefits components. If you actually go and take a look then later on, if you look at actuals, you will see wage lines where there's no budget number under parks or the NDCC or the ACC. It's because we rolled their wage up under the general administration, but we have staff track, generally speaking, on their timesheets where their activity has been, because that helps us set user rates when we look at the cost of delivering a certain service, whether it be ice time or or general parks maintenance or the like. So part of it is just how we budget it versus how we assign it through the year. Directors each month get, obviously by function, but we also get the rolled up number, see what it is at that point in time against the general number that's carried in our budget to make sure we're staying on track. You know, for 9 months into the year, you know, where are we in proportion to the overall budget?
Ms. Fox.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I can just add to that, when I take a quick look at 2025, where we're sitting right now, we are within $10,000 of the budget, so it has it is we have fairly comparable to what the costs were for 2025. Still have to check the accrual, so can't say that's the final one, but it's fairly close.
Thank you. Further questions, councillors? Council Rooms, of course. No. Sorry. Oh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is for items on page 40. Particularly with the heritage, so there's a transfer to reserves that didn't happen this year. But I was also noticing that we have a lot of work with the Heritage Advisory Committee is underway. There's all kinds of studies that will need to be done this year, and I was just wondering, and there was also the Natural Heritage Landscape Survey that is under discussion, and I was just wondering where the funds for those activities were coming from in this budget. Thank you.
CEO McNeil.
Madam Mayor, through to Councillor Wilms. So any study that order of magnitude was actually a capital item, not an operating item. But if you look at the 2026 draft capital budget, which we'll be discussing on Wednesday night, there is nothing set aside for two major components. One would be the heritage designation of Part 4 buildings, as well as the cultural heritage landscape study. And as we had that discussion with council early in 2025, until we actually understand how many properties might advance toward a Part 4 designation, we would come forward to council with a number and seek a post-budget approval for that spending allowance. And the same thing for the cultural heritage landscape study. We have right now in funds, we've got approximately 100,000 set aside in reserves for heritage studies undefined. And then there's another 15 or 18,000 in other smaller heritage reserve accounts.
Council Rooms.
We do know that this is probably gonna, even if we just did one bit with the Heritage Advisory Committee, we just put the landscape survey, we know it's gonna cost more than 100,000, or it's very likely to, so I'm just wondering if we need to work that better into our budget upfront, since we know we do have a hard deadline specifically for the cultural heritage designations that has to happen this year. If it's gonna happen at all, it's our deadline of 2027, right? So I'm just wondering if we should be actually doing something.
If we're going to recommend such a thing, I need to know where the money's coming from, how much it will impact the budget, and is it actually gonna take place in 2026 budget? CEO McNeely.
So, Madam Mayor, the Heritage Advisory Committee has been working through the built heritage inventory list. They've had a couple of checkpoints with Township Council, and the number of properties on the list has dropped significantly. I believe, and I'm going from memory, we're about 95 or 97 properties on the current listing that are still being evaluated. The Heritage Advisory Committee in mid-November hosted the library term, an open house. Each of those approximate 95 property owners were notified. Probably have 35 to 40 people here in attendance. How many of those will actually migrate toward a Part 4 designation is unknown. We're actually meeting 2 weeks from now with an individual that attended the meeting and expressed an interest in having their property designated and wants to have a little bit further understanding before they actually agree to it being advanced. But out of that 95 or 97 properties, I don't know how many the committee will ultimately recommend. I don't know how many willing property owners we will actually have. We have estimated the cost per designation will be something in the order of between $4,000 and $6,500, depending upon how much research we need to do to properly inform the what we call schedule to the designating bylaw, which gives the detailed descriptions of the heritage or cultural attributes that make that property unique and significant. So that number would really depend on whether there's 5 properties, 7 properties, 12 properties. Until we actually know how many properties are going to be advanced, it's difficult to frame a budget. On the cultural heritage landscape study for the Sprague's Road District, the council may recall in staff report, we identified notionally back of the paper not having closed. We had estimated the cost of approximately $80,000 to undertake the study. The market will tell us what the true price is. And as I said, we can come into council for both projects with a budget, the rationale for the budget and the sources of funding to undertake them.
Councilwoman.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I just wanted to comment on the heritage designation. Deputy Clerk Bell and I probably have about, I think we're running about a dozen properties right now that have a designation. And potentially with this additional might be 15, so we're already around 12 to 15. We talked initially about 5 or 6. So we're already double what we had anticipated. So that's kind of where we're at. So if it's $5,000 per rate, then it's like $60,000.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Christine looks like she's sheltered. Are we ready to move on with the motions then? Councilwoman.
Madam Mayor, I have one question on page 40. I know that we're locked into this water regional economic development for $20,000, but are we getting value out of that? And is that still something that we should be looking at in 2026 now with the economy the way it is? Does it make sense for us to continue putting money into this? And same with the tourism council, like are these two things something that we should be looking at a little more seriously?
CEO McNeil.
So Madam Mayor, through to Councilor Bowman, for the Waterloo Economic Development Corporation, we still have 2 years left on the current partnership agreement. And so, we would be looking at 2028 renewal. I can tell you that we can't deliver the program and the services that they provide to us for $1,000. We use them on a regular basis to try and access intelligence and or contacts at both the federal and provincial levels to secure tax credits and or grant programs that could be available to our businesses, either in terms of attraction, retention, or where they may be retooling and or retraining their staff. And we heavily rely on them to make those introductions. And they do provide assistance and guidance to those businesses when they make their grant applications. This past November, they have worked with myself, and we have all sorts of new information that will be going on our website to once again refresh information, bring it to current value, representative data or key points of information that would be targeted toward the investment community or prospective purchasers in one or more of our industrial subdivisions that have draft plan approval. Those are some of the services they provide. The other is they're the primary contact with the province of Ontario, so we're international firms. Maybe approaching either the government of Canada or the government of Ontario, and they're doing perhaps a search of candidate properties for a certain business. They ferry their information through Waterloo EDC, and Waterloo EDC liaises with each of the area municipalities. And in some cases, there have been candidate properties that have been identified potentially in North Dumfries. And then we provide a joint briefing paper, for lack of a better term, to go back to either that industrial sector or the search consultant that has been retained. And made the original reach out to the government of Ontario or the federal government. So for 20,000, yes, we're getting good value for service. It is something that we always, when we come up for renewal, that we look at, are we getting our value for money? Certainly that was an exercise when we entered into the last contract, and as you can see, our numbers have not changed. From the time we actually enrolled in this program, which was in the year of 2017. We have been flatlined at that $20,000 variable. So yes, I feel we've had good value in that regard. As it relates to the Waterloo Region Marketing and Tourism Corporation, or some people will refer to as Explore Waterloo. At times it can be a little bit frustrating because we do not have a lot of, I'm going to use the word tourism destinations in terms of Main Street activities. In other words, we don't have Oktoberfest, we don't have you know, the higher order places of entertainment. We don't have the big sports venues, as an example. That's a lot of what they are trying to promote. We are an area that's more aligned with day trips or portions of a day trip. Whether it be the agritourism opportunity, going to our farm gates, going to the wooded areas and taking advantage of our trails or seasons, or the cycling tourism aspect. So at $5,000, are we getting money for that? Probably close to it, but can we get more? Should we be doing more in terms of better linkages? That opportunity does exist, but right now we're sort of crowded out by some of the higher order things that are being pursued, like convention centers and the like. Those are never going to come to North Dumfries. And right now, the board, which we do not sit on, the board is made up of 6 of the 8 funding partners, the region included with 7 area municipalities, as well as the private sector representatives. And right now they're doing things like accommodation studies and convention centers and you know, sports tourism and things like that. You can see some of the benefits being pursued just to the north of us at Fisher Holman and Huron. That goes well beyond the neighborhood or district recreation complex. It's at a provincial and national scale, just like Rim Park or the On, as 3 examples. And right now, the board's focusing on a lot of attention and energy in that area. Where I see us is more of those day trips, trying to take advantage of 6.5 million people that live within a 45-minute drive of this address.
I don't see any more questions to Councilwoman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question on page 37 and page 38. Buried in this budget, I can see there's an issue with water. Like Santa fountain water, $16,000 actual for this year, $10,000 budgeted. Then we look at the ACC water and sewer up to 21,000 from like 14,000 a couple of years ago. And then on page 38, the NDC water and sewer is now at $70,000. So I'm just wondering, I know the costs are high because we use the region's water, but I'm wondering, what can we do to conserve water? Can we use gray water? Is there different ways that we can do this water? Because the water bill, I mean, we're spending over $100,000 just on water in 3 locations.
CEO McNally.
So the Ontario Building Code Madam Mayor, through Council Rowland, does allow for gray water systems, so for the non-potable aspects, so for example. If we capture. Certain water, let's just not out of the toilet, but let's say out of the shower or out of the sink. We would actually have to have a separate plumbing system. To take, for lack of a better term, that product. And then have a closed loop and it would actually go to the toilet, as an example. Or it could go to the irrigation system. Okay, so you would actually have to twin portions of your water system to be able to segregate the gray water and direct it as to a destination where it could be applied, where it is non-potable in use as a secondary generation of the water. We have never done a cost benefit analysis as to what it would cost to segregate the water. You have to undertake that analysis to look at what your rate of return on investment is going to be. Does it pay itself back after 5 years or 7 years or whatever the case is? As a general statement, it is always best to conserve water to ensure that, we're using judiciously this precious resource. That's more of a philosophical statement versus a budgetary statement. And so, how much weighting one would put on that versus the return on investment, that would have to be a political decision as part of your lens. When we look at the splash pads, obviously the hotter the summer or the more frequent hot days, consumption will be higher than, let's say, a cool wet summer, as an example. We now operate 2 splash pads. 100% of the water that goes through those display features is not captured. It's just discharged. If we were going to harvest that water and reuse it, we would actually have to put a chlorination system and a storage tank for that system. If we were going to recycle it through the splash pad a second time. Once again, there's a cost benefit analysis, which we have never done. Or if I look exclusively here at the NDCC, does it make sense to harvest the water that's come off the splash pad, store it, and commingle it with fresh water that may get irrigated onto the 4 soccer pitches? Okay, I don't have to worry about the chlorination because it's non-potable. But now I would have to pipe with that water that goes down the drain of the splash pad here at the NDCC, direct it to a storage reservoir, and then blend combination of both the gray water with fresh water as part of that irrigation. Once again, there's never been a cost benefit analysis for that. It's an engineering solution. It would reduce your overall volume of irrigation. And once again, we're paying the urban rate, just like you would in a house, for the water that goes onto the irrigated fields. And so any reduction in terms of fresh water, there would be some sort of blending with recovered water from the splash pad, would be an overall savings. But it's once again, what is that return on investment? By putting in that infrastructure and operating that blended system.
CEO McNeely, can we ask for a report on this later on in the spring, because we can't do it for this budget now, but it'd be interesting to have the information to see if that's feasible.
So just for clarity, are we looking at the buildings or just the splash pad vis-a-vis the context of the irrigation fields around Cow Park?
I would suggest one at first and then see what happens with the one. And then see if it works to move time or to leave the whole thing. Councilwoman, can you make a comment? Council Austin as well.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So my comment was simply, if we're going to be renovating, we are going to be renovating the ACC. and we're adding this new pad here at the NDCC. Is this an opportunity to be looking at this gray water system during those renovations and additions? Is there a way to harvest water from the roof system? I know a lot of homeowners do that. We have massive roofs with lots of water coming down. I know, I realize that involves storage, but now's the time, as we're doing these new projects, to think about how we can get this water, serve this water, reuse water, grab rainwater, whatever we can do to try to bring this built, because our water costs are just going up and up and up. And I like the idea of recycling that water from the splash pad into the irrigation system. But I think there's also a bigger picture, which is the new projects and how can we gather some of that water.
CEO McNally.
So Madam Mayor, given the project budgets, now, the NDCC for the twin pad, the net zero. We've let that contract, it did not account for a green water system. So that would be something, change of scope. And it would be at this stage both costly, but it also could delay the project because we have designed plumbing for the addition based on, I'll use the word, a traditional system. We do currently harvest the water off of the roof here at the NDCC. It goes into storage facilities above grade, back of the building, and we use that for irrigation through small trash pumps that is used for gardens in the community garden area. It's not a gray water system, it's exclusively taking water off of the roof here at the NDCC. As it relates to the ACC, we have not accounted for that in the current budget forecast. We have not estimated what that cost would be. What's in the forecast for 27-28 as the adaptive reuse of the building looks at just making the building AODA compliant, as well as proper insulation, HVAC systems for the building. And then obviously aspects attributed to the gymnasium-like structure. And that's what the bulk of the budget expenditures for. We do have time, that if council wishes to look at the ability to look at a gray water system, either all of the building or portion of the building. But it will have an upward adjustment to what's carried in the forecast rate. What that quantum would look like, I don't.
I think personally, I'd like to explore it for the ACC at least. And let us know, as we have to budget years to decide. Right, we're not bringing it into 2026. So.
Yeah, work for the ACC for 2026 is exclusively the exterior skin. The adaptive reuse is later in the forecast period.
And that's what I'm saying, we do have time for that one. So Councillor Austin, you next.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So years ago, when we did when I headed the outdoor needs assessment committee, and we were designing and building through Gateman Malloy. And I also incorporated the help of my brother at the time. He's retired now. He was the Parks and Rec manager for the city of Oakville. So in talking with Mike Malloy and my brother, this topic of capturing water came up. And they were both on the same page. And I said to my brother, I said, out of all the, splash pad, this, that, the other thing that they use that consumes water, how much of it is captured and reused, chlorinated, whatever? And he said zero. He said the costs associated are so high that it's not worth it, because you have to have a staffed water treatment plant in order to make the runoff water, unless you're trying to capture, like you said, strictly for soccer fields or something like that. And but other than that, treating water was astronomical. The costs were astronomical. The second part is in regards to the ACC. If we're not having hockey there anymore, I'm just wondering how much water is actually going to be used at the facility. Like it's nice to look environmentally responsible. However, I would hate to put a couple $100,000 into a system when we're using a fraction of the water that we were using before. You know, it all sounds good to sit and talk about conservation and taking care of this. And yes, of the water in our township, our region, well, our township is extremely expensive. It's just, I think that the alternative is going to be even higher.
With the water system today, what's going to happen in the near future, I think we're gonna have to be looking at more of these things. And actually, I was on council at the time that we decided the splash pad would have a tank to contain the water that would not be treated, but be used for the fields. And we were shocked at council when that did not come into play. It was to go out of the fields at that time. That was decided, that was in the plans. Council Austin.
Just on that note, I believe that tank that was proposed to go in was a tank that was proposed because of the water pressure, because they came out of the NDCC with a 2-inch main instead of a 4-inch main, and then they proposed to put in a storage tank with another pumping system of it because the water pressure was not there was no water pressure. It wasn't sufficient to irrigate the fields.
That's because it didn't go through with our plans and the building was ignored, and that's why I say to Mr. Raycroft, when this second facility gets built, that it follows only the regulations and the will of this council without changes by any exterior person. Anyways, let's move on. Any further questions on the budget? Seeing none, do we want to go forward now to the motions? The first motion is quite lengthy. And it, Mary, have the first one. Over here. Council Williams has it. There are several items on it. We have two choices. We can look at this whole motion and deal with it tonight, or we can separate it out into two parts. So, let's just look at them. So, not everybody has a copy of it, right? Can we display it on the screen? Oh, everybody does have copies? Oh, good. Okay, so the first one is the grant process. The second one is the Green Strategy Reserve Account. Third is the phase 1 of the Road Safety Initiative Fund. And I won't go through them all, but are we prepared to deal with these tonight or not? Councilor Austin.
So there's two of the items that are in there are the two items that I requested to speak about, and
The tennis courts and the pickleball, yeah.
yeah, so and the Public Works facility, and I was told we're not talking about those till tomorrow, so I don't think we should be voting on them today.
That's true, unless we want to discuss them now. If we want to discuss them now, we're going to put this off till tomorrow. Councilors on that, Chairman. Wednesday, okay, so we will go back to just doing a single motion. Do you still have that action? Thank you. Councilor Rose, did you set the single motion?
This one, regards to the inspection,
Yes, please.
about the immigration partnership.
Correct.
All right. So, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Lehman, that council directs staff to advise the immigration partnership that financial support will be provided by the township as part of the 2026 budget.
And if I can add a caveat, you're already paying for this through the Region of Waterloo as they decided to fully fund it. Plus, I believe an increase per year. So you're already paying for it through your taxes. So this would have been an additional payment. So all those in favor? It's carried. Thank you. Councilor Lawson, the second motion, please.
Move by myself, second by Councilor Tilly, that. Move by myself, second by Councilor Tilly, that council moving to close. Meeting session at 7:23 p.m. pursuant to the municipal act section S 239(2) to discuss. CAO report number 1-2026 update of township property acquisition or disposal matters. A proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board, municipal act section 239(2)C. And 7.2 CAO report number 2-2026, labor relations or employee negotiation, municipal act section 239(2)D.
All those in favor? You're welcome.
The council reconvene into open session at 8:05 PM.
All those in favor? Carried, thank you. A report from closed was report from CAO 01/2026. Council received an update on the CAO related to the township property acquisition or disposition matters. The staff report and the discussion was an update on the status of various property matters underway. No further actions were undertaken other than to receive the update. And second report, CAO 02/2026, direction was given to the CAO with respect to a human resources matter. Bylaws, reading the bylaws, Council Rooms, please, persons committee.
Moved by myself, second by Councillor Rowland, that the following bylaws be read a first and second time. Bylaw number 3612-26, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the special council meeting held on January 12, 2026.
All those in favor? Carries, thank you. Councillor Tilt, you have a lot this time.
All the end here.
Third reading of the plan. I don't know.
Just
See, I'll make it, Councillor Tilly.
move by myself, second by Councillor Osmer, the bylaw number 3612-26 be read a third and final time, and be signed and sealed by the mayor and clerk.
All those in favor? Carried, thank you. Councillor Austin, the adjournment, please.
Moved by myself, second by Council Williams, that whereas business before this council meeting has been completed at 8:07 PM and be it resolved that this meeting adjourned.
All those in favor? Carried, thank you.